Welcome to another episode of I Mustache You Something. I just confessed to the group that I did not post the last one yet. So our three fans are not just waiting with bated breath on the four of us getting our act together and meeting, but on me actually uploading the video. So my apologies to all three of you. We do have Mitch here. Hi, Mitch.
Who are you? Who are you all? New phone, who dis?
Mitch is one of the three, actually, is what.
Actually, Mitch, I sent you the recording. What are your impressions of the last
Yeah, oh yeah.
conversation?
I listened to the part where I was talked about, and then you guys started talking about the Iran war, and it started just like devolve into like Iran stuff. Then I stopped listening, if I'm honest. We need to talk about theology and things that are hot button topics. You
Oh,
guys need
like
to get
what?
back to the violence of theology. I don't know
So
what's
what?
going on in the church. Who's scary? Who's not scary? Talk to me. Give me the gossip, dude. Give me the gossip of what's going on in the East Coast Church, bro.
Sharif's face.
Let's hear it. I'm out of the loop, and
I was
things are
literally
too
just
good in
talking to
Colorado.
somebody about how Sharif is simultaneously like, if not the most brilliant person I know, top five, but also the most childish where it comes to like church gossip, like and politics, where like you'd think somebody of his level and caliber of intelligence would be like, oh no, that's beneath me. He's like, no, no, tell me more.
That's just his innocence.
Yeah,
That's his innocence.
No,
I want to hear it all, man.
it's very
I want
juicy
to
and
hear
spicy.
what's going down. Give me the hot gossip. Kidding. Isn't it a sin to gossip? I think. Pretty sure it is.
Has that ever stopped you?
No, I'm an American.
You're German.
No, bro. Born raised here.
So Sharif
In
and
my
I,
blood, whatever that means.
Sharif and I are gonna do. Sharif, did you decide if we're gonna invite people or is it just gonna be you and me?
Well, we need to talk. But tell them first what's going on.
So we're trying to um, impress upon people the importance of clarity of thought when it comes to how you express yourself on theological matters, and we're doing a four-part series, and we're starting with this Sunday on terminology. But I guess by the time this gets posted, it'll be like last Sunday. Um, but what we're starting with is um, the idea that in order for you to be clear, right? If the other person is like getting a clear message from you, you need to be clear, right? Like they can't be clear about what you're saying if you're not clear about what you're saying, right? And one of the inherent difficulties with
Clearly.
theology is that you cannot be clear about what you're saying because you're talking about God, right? So there's an inherent like sort of cataphatic, apophatic, like there's only so much you can say with clarity about God who is beyond understanding.
If
So
anything.
right? So you have to figure out like, okay, this is what the church, capital C church, has agreed upon as the terminology that we use when we say X. And I'm going to be consistent when the church is consistent in saying X. And when the church says X, it means this, which has these cataphatic claims and these apophatic boundaries that we say, okay, like we don't want to touch that because we don't want to overstate things. And inevitably, you get into historical debates about, okay, well, this part of Christianity said X, and this part of Christianity said Y, and they actually meant the same thing, right? Or they used the word X differently, and that created some confusion. But before you get into the discrepancies, like the X's and the Y's, you still have to say, like, okay, like, do you have a basic understanding of what Christianity is? Because you're talking about terminology and there's no core understanding of what that terminology is trying to express, then you've already lost it. Um, I think it's I mean, this is Sharif's pet project. I think I mean, I don't know if anybody's listening or if the same 10 people that already find this interesting are going to find it interesting, and the other, I don't know, 150 are like, what? What?
So, Mitch, we did talk about the church and theology last week. Sharif was talking about the unpreparedness of servants when they talk about the humanity of Christ. And
Hmm.
we touched on those subjects, the true humanity and the unity of the personhood of Christ and different sort of uh, low-key heresies in our church that are not spread by the pulpit, but definitely held by the populace. So you missed out on a lot of good stuff there if you thought we were just talking about Iran.
It
Nah,
was the
yeah,
second half last time.
I'll
Huh?
have to. You guys got to get to the good stuff right at the front. I love talking low key heresies. It's great.
So, Bitch, are you familiar with the monotheletist controversy?
No, nerd, I'm not.
It's your problem. It's not my problem. It's a Catholic problem. It's
Oh
not.
no, I there's a thousand million things that I am blissfully unaware of when it comes to Catholic
Okay.
Church
Okay.
controversies.
Okay. Okay. Because so that's one of the things that I would love for someone to articulate for me in a meaningful way. And I might have to double back to one of my professors at Boston College to be like, I know you kind of tried to explain this before, but I missed it. Like, can you tell me, because it's something that came out of Chalcedon, where if you believe that Christ has two natures, one that is a human nature and one that is a divine nature, and those are separate natures, even if you accept that Christ is one hypostasis, one person, those two natures, inevitably the question arises, how do you reconcile them? And if he has two natures, then does he have two wills? And the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, under Maximus the Confessor, you know, landed on something that is very confusing to us as Oriental Miaphysites, that yes, Christ has two wills. And we're like, how can he have two wills? He's one person that carries one will. It's not a question that ever arises for us, because if he's one person, the united God man, the incarnate word, then you don't ask if he has two wills. It's not, it's
Wait,
not a
but hold on.
question
But
that you
the
ask.
question begs to be asked. And when he said, "Not my will, but thy will," what are you talking there? Those are two wills. And I know you. So now you're going to distinguish between the will of the Father and the will of the Son. Oh, in sort of the unincarnate reality, there's a difference between the wills of the Father and the will of the Son. If Jesus didn't
I
have
mean,
two,
maybe that's how Maximus answered it. I'm not familiar with Maximus the Confessor at all, or
yeah,
the
but how would we?
Monotheletist debate.
Yeah, but how would you if you say that he only had one will? And if
No, no, I'm not saying he had one will. I'm
okay,
saying it's not even a question that arises, right? Because we never got to that point in the debate. The question was never asked on the Oriental side, because if you don't if you don't declare that he has a human nature that's separate from his divine nature, and you unify the human nature and the divine nature into the nature of the incarnate word, that Miaphysite formula of Saint Cyril,
into the personhood of
in
Christ,
the
right?
person of Hood of Christ, then there's no you don't ask the question, right?
No, but okay. So now let's ask the question. All right. So
I know, but like it's
did
a
he have
question out
two?
of context.
How is the question out of context? Since we're walking on since we're working on the idea of two natures united in the personhood of Christ,
Mm.
um, without mingling, without confusion, without separation, then Then of course he had two wills.
I personally, I would feel uncomfortable answering a question that was never asked by the Sea of Alexandria. I
You
don't know,
should be
Sharif, if
you should definitely be then more comfortable. You should feel very origin-like in your ability to now explore these without any hindrance of possible claims of heresy, because it's been quiet for 1700 years. So since it's been quiet, the echoes must reverberate throughout the chamber and anything goes. Shouldn't you feel good about that? I feel good about it. I'm empowered by that.
I will take Sharif's answer as my own.
So again, um, I I brag that I'm very practical and very pastoral. Will this question have any pastoral implication or practical implication? Or is this question will help me in my way of salvation, help my kids in Sunday school in their transformation? Maybe in the philosophical material. But
But even
if
on a more practical level, right? So like
so,
how do you understand him as a man, but also like when he has to like make a decision on like as we make decisions every day on how we do X or Y, and our
yeah.
will has the ability to like is divided. Like is it divided? Like, like how do
So
you it's tough to
here's how
reconcile.
I understand it pastorally. Maybe it's not theologically sound. Christ as one nature or one hypostasis, one person. When he's hungry, he make a decision to eat.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's a sanctified decision by the union of the two natures. And I'm called to be like this. How? When I'm hungry and I'm making decision to eat or to fast, me myself, I'm transforming from my old creation to the new creation. And in this transformation, I need to resemble the one God, the one Christ, by sanctifying my will. I'm in the process of doing this. He had it perfect. That's why he is a perfecter of our faith, and he's perfecting our faith. The same like in accepting pain or rejecting pain. So when he said, "Let be thy will and not my will." Here, my will in his state of kenosis, like in his state of emptying himself.
Yeah, that's
He's
the state
talking,
he's in.
yeah, he's talking on behalf of the whole humanity.
You
But
sound just like the person that you were trashing last week. That last week, for those of you who weren't paying attention, Mitch, last week you were like saying, "Oh, how can people still not really believe that when he suffered, he really suffered, and that when he died, he really died?" Now comes this same exact phrase that says, "Oh, not my will, but thy will." You're like, well, he was speaking generally in the sense of humanity. Like, what? Why? Why do
no,
you
no, no, no,
why do you deny him the humanity by
no, no,
saying
no, no,
he's
no.
speaking in some esoteric way?
Not on
Boo!
behalf. He's he is human, and he spoke on behalf of the whole humanity, in my understanding, in a
So he really
unified
did it. So
will.
there was no struggle when he said,
No, no,
"Not my will, but thy will." There was just him
no,
mouthing
no. He
off a
struggled.
feeling for humanity.
He struggled like he suffered, like he hungered, like he was tempted. He struggled
So
completely.
then, what's it mean? Not my will, but thy will.
So the human, oh, okay. So
See, there
it,
you go.
yeah, you're tracking me.
This is why I punted.
So I think in this moment, or not in this moment, I think this explained to us that there was a real struggle that is sanctified by the union, or
Okay.
that is deified by the union, or that's glorified by the union, or through the union. And I'm called to be in the same path, but in a gradual way.
There you go. There's your pastoral lesson that even Jesus submitted his will freely to the will of the Father. And as
while struggling.
of course, I mean it says, what's the actual verse, is it I that it's either putting it into the mouth of Jesus, or one of the authors is saying it about Jesus, that he despaired even unto death. Does it say he despaired even unto death, or does Jesus say I despaired even unto death? Does anyone have that verse?
I think he said I despaired.
Second Corinthians 1:8. And the New King James says, "For we do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, of our trouble." Nope, sorry, that was not
No, it's in Matthew
Jesus.
28, where Jesus tells his disciples, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. And I think in some translations, at least I grew up with the New King James, so I think in the New King James it probably says he despaired even unto death. So what is that? What is that? What is that? That's part of the true humanity of Christ. I don't think you get to a true humanity of Christ if you knock out his will. If you make his will if you say no, Jesus didn't have a human will.
No, he had a human will.
Then what? Okay, so there's the answer. Mina, why were you
United with the divine will.
Why were you gone? Why were you
without mingling,
But
without
doesn't that
breaking,
saying
without
but if you're saying it's united, then he's not fully, the question is, then you're saying his will isn't fully human because it's united with a different will. Like the will of
as
the
his
God
nature,
man
the same as his
is,
nature. Like
All right,
the
it's
same
but
as
united
that's
with everything.
but that's my question is like how, like oxygen and hydrogen are united, therefore they are something else. But they're they're working together at that point. It can't be fully nitrogen or fully oxygen and fully hydrogen. Like they work together
There
at
is
that
no
point. My
analogy. There is no analogy
yeah.
you can turn this into. You just have to accept the mystery on belief. There is no getting into our head. The Trinity is
Sure.
easier to understand, to be honest with you, than this.
I see. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I agreed.
But
But
listen
my
to this from Hebrews. It's even more confusing for me. Who, talking about Christ in the day of his flesh, when he had offered up prayer and supplication with vehement cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death and was heard because of his godly fear. That's impressive. Cries and tears to the Father who was able to save him from death. So, as a mystery, we sense, we feel, or we kind of understand the periphery of the union. But I don't think that we can have any analogy that can, as Ralph said, can capture the whole reality, at least in our earthly life. But what I can understand, what I want to emphasize, or what I want to teach, or what I want to acquire in my life is I need, or I'm called to submit my will, my body, my instinct, my lust, my emotion, my intentions to be in the process of the unification or in the process of glorification.
Yes,
And
just like Jesus.
that's a mystery and a process. How we can simplify this to our congregation, how we can teach it to our congregation, and how we can really apply it in our life, not just talking about it.
Yeah, because I mean, listen, all of these things, if they're not for transformation, then what's the purpose of it? We're not,
Mhm.
this is not about just an education. This is about, being like God today so I can be more like God tomorrow, so then I can be more like God for all of eternity. I mean, that's the whole gist of this, right? That's why you're having this series. not just to iron out
From a
words.
pastoral point of view,
Right.
I don't have like I said, I don't have this issue of the two wills because
Including,
for me, it's a united will.
yes, understood. But just like if
How
his
and
divinity
when
and his humanity parted not, parted not. So there is a recognition of there being two things that became united at the incarnation, right? And one of those two things had to have been a human will.
oh yeah, what is not assumed cannot be healed, including the will.
Right. Is that your answer, Mina? You got your answer to that, Mina?
No, I think the only thing I would personally be comfortable, saying is with Father Thomas Hopko, the Eastern Orthodox, teacher extraordinaire, when he says, orthodoxy is paradoxy, and the idea that anything that you say is going to potentially lead you down an incorrect path. And one of the things that became a problem at Chalcedon was even the terminology of out of two natures or in two natures, or from two natures or in two natures. And the problem is that you're talking about something that is timeless and limitless, right? So that dimension of time that is being debated is immaterial when you're talking about Christ. And the communion and union with the Father, and that inextricability between the will of the divine Christ and the will of the divine Godhead, that those two things are always going to be united without getting into a Eutychian monophysite extremism where it's like, oh, so you don't really believe that he had a divine, you don't believe that he really had a human will. No, there is a mystery in how he can have a perfectly divine will and a perfectly human will. But I don't get to the point where I feel comfortable personally saying he has two wills, because it becomes the same problem of attribution, where are you attributing nature to the hypostasis, or are you attributing nature to the essence? If you attribute nature to the hypostasis, he has one nature, the incarnate word. If you attribute nature to the essence, then he has two natures, the divine essence, the divine nature, the divine, the human nature, the human essence. And now it's the same with the will. You come to the same problem. Are you attributing the will to the hypostasis, or are you attributing it to the essence? If it's an attribute of the essence, then yeah, you have two wills. But if it's an attribute of the person, the hypostasis, then no, he has one will. And functionally speaking, I think both could be problematic if taken to an extreme. And this is where the pastoral thing that Sharif is trying to bring in, which is, listen, if you're going to get confused by a separation between his humanity and his divinity, then unify them. If you're going to get confused by a collapsing of the human into the divine and becoming confused that Christ wasn't fully human, then separate them. Do whatever it is that you need to do so that you don't get confused by the pitfalls of one or the other.
That's part of it. And the other thing is, pastorally speaking, again, if you look at the mystery of reconciliation or the sacrament of confession or repentance, however you call it, we in the Church of the Middle East, meaning the church that lived and grew with Islamic influence, we have a hidden semi-Eutychian understanding of God. And as a consequence, we understand the reconciliation, the repentance, the metanoia, more as a transactional and more as penance and more as how we call it, more like a justification process rather than a transformation process. And this is what we need to change in our mindset.
Can I ask a question? And I don't mean to be, I mean, I am being fairly thick with my question, but can you kind of give me an example or break it down Barney style for me? Like in a very, like what you mean when you say that?
Like when I sin, my understanding of sin is losing the mark, like I'm losing my way. When
Yep,
I
yep.
curse, for example, at work or at home or wherever. So to be justified by a penance, I go to the priest in the confession, and he told me, "Oh, you cursed 10 times. You need to recite X amount of prayers, or fast X amount, or do something to overcome the evil things that you are doing." But when I go to in the Orthodox mystery of reconciliation, the problem is not the curse. The problem is the anger. And the problem is not the anger. The problem is the ego. The problem is not the ego. The problem is the lack of connection with Christ, or
Hmm.
losing the mark. So I don't care, or technically the Orthodox priest doesn't really care how many times you cursed, or or like you threw a fit, but you want to go deeper and deeper to heal this. Not because there is something that you need to pay for, or is it something that um, if you like I got this question in certain meeting. If I sinned 100 times and I confessed 95 times, what about the last five before I die? So, so I told them, okay, we don't have a purgatory. And it's not about the number of sins, the number of curses, the number of lies. It's about the whole direction. So if I believe as an Oriental Orthodox in a miaphysite, a one nature of to nature, or from to nature, or into nature, whatever you call it, and I believe that my body is sanctified through the union exactly or similarly to the human nature of Christ that was glorified, sanctified, deified, resurrected as one nature. So here the concept is totally different. It's not God that is far, far away. Like in Arabic, we call it Allah Ta'ala. Ta'ala meaning
Right.
very high, very high. It's God incarnate, Emmanuel,
Right.
God with us.
Right. A transcendent sort of like
But
God
maybe
in
I'm
a
still
very way.
misunderstanding. So you're saying that it's a knee-jerk reaction to focus on the like basically paying, paying penance is the main focus, and the less focus is on the getting to the root and getting, the act of confession itself is what gets you closer to God, and then going and getting the priest working on the underlying ego or what lies underneath the sin is
The
that's
healing, the
the
healing.
heal. So that's interesting to me because so I believe no Catholic. My father confession, the one I talk to weekly, is Coptic, and I've never had. It's always been the latter, which is to go deeper to the healing.
And that's correct. And I think
Yeah,
what
we need to
what
promote
Sharif
this
is
more.
getting at, what Sharif is getting at is, if we're doing it properly, we're doing it the way that your father confession is doing it.
Mm.
And the Catholic Church has a similar um, misdirection, this also has, pockets where, like within the Catholic tradition, there's people that lean in this direction, people that lean in that direction. But it's important to clarify that the origin is different. So for the Catholics, it comes from Augustine, Anselm, guilt, right? Like that sort of like, I'm dirty, I need to be cleaned. Humanity is filthy, and we need God to clean us. And that restoration comes from a um, a reversal, or a um, uh, a penance, or some kind of atonement for that sin guilt problem that was created by Adam, right? And for us, it's not so much like the guilt of Adam, it's the distance of God. And rather than borrowing
Mm,
too heavily from Augustine and Anselm, we're borrowing too heavily from Islam, where it's
I
like,
see.
no, right? Like this Eutychian problem, you know, isn't from Islam. Eutyches, was 300-400 years before Islam, but that Islamic leaning of the one God, the God that is distant, the one that we can never be reconciled to, becomes sort of the pull and the direction and the repentance that we need to have away from this distancing that we have from God. So whether it's the guilt or uh, the
Can never touch it.
yeah, like regardless of what it is that distances us from God, you end up with functionally the same pastoral problem of, I'm never going to be good
Yeah.
enough. I need to, say my Hail Marys. I need to do my Matanyas. I need to do whatever, um, rubric, rule following, box checking approach that becomes a proxy for an actual relationship with God that is transformative in the way that it was intended, where it's not
Yeah.
about guilt, and it is not God is up here, it's God is with us.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm very
interested to
familiar with
know.
the Augustine, or like the Catholic guilt was real growing up. I'll tell you that
Yeah,
in the 90s.
right.
And it's
And the
not any,
origin
for
is
me, it
different.
hasn't been anymore. It's been waning, and
It's
it's my
it's been
experience, but
de-emphasized, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested actually to know the current stand of the Catholic Church post-Vatican II on this, because I feel that they are leaning more toward orthodoxy in this particular understanding of reconciliation, of healing. Like John Paul I, for example, one of the shortest pope who lived, like it was like 30 days or 32 days.
Yep.
Right.
When he spoke about the motherhood of God, I think he was leaning towards this particular healing or soothing or the Kyrie eleison. So
Can we pause here and start another episode?
Yeah.
Do you guys have more time?
I can stay for a little bit. I have family responsibilities,
What are
sir.
you what are you
Family
talking
responsibilities.
about in terms of like how long?
Like I can probably do like 10, 15 max.
Is that negotiable?
Not, I'm not,
It's always
not for me
negotiable.
to, not for me to continue to be a good father. I put first things first.
Well, we're not concerned about you being a good father.
Okay,
We were
so
just, yeah.
we'll
How much
continue
time do
this
we have left on the
conversation on the
recording?
next episode of I Mustache You Something. Let's log back on.
Okay.